Might be the Bennett complex, certainly that's important. It might be the Thorne Memorial School. You may have another building. But in each case, the importance of a building is the maintenance of the building. Look at Bennett. As much of a treasure as it was, look at it today. And for those who see it on a daily basis, it's a tragedy. Think of the Thorne Memorial School, and many of you graduated from there or had classes there. The future right now is up in the air. Hopefully, in short order, it will be resolved. But the bottom line is, a building needs to be maintained. And for those who have a vision and a willingness to do it, we are all blessed. Tonight, the Molellas are here. They're going to be talking about what they've done as a family. But in the bigger picture, what they've done is preserve the tallest building, and some may argue the most important building because of what it represented for the entire community. You think about it, a 9-story building here in Millbrook, that's the mill. 9 stories. Most of us don't even realize it. Why? Because we go along Hertz Village Road. But if you saw it from our side, the other side of the ravine, where the waterfall is, and count the levels going all the way down to the water, it's 9 stories. 9 stories of history and tradition and importance. Now, depending on how old you might be, you might have a name that you assign to it before the Molellas. It could be Walsh. How many remember that name? The Walsh family, who were there. I was fortunate enough in Putnam County to have as a dear friend George Merkel. Well, George Merkel's mother was a Walsh, and he spent his summers with his grandparents across from the mill and the Walsh house. And I've got pictures of him about that big with a tire that's huge that he's in. And he talked about what the mill did and how important it was. But there's another name that you may associate with it as well, Dietrich. Because the Dietrich estate actually took that mill and converted the water power to electricity and absolutely stabilized it and expanded it. Another name, Anson, because it's the Anson mill that was the basis for the complex itself. Well, that's the joy of history. Lots and lots of details. You can go to a book to find information, but how much more exciting it is to have someone who physically is a part of it and can talk about it, and whose family members are here, who can share the stories. One last name, and that is Helen Gould. Some of you may remember Helen. Well, before it was Gould, it was Foster. And the house that the Fosters had, right next to the mill, overlooked that mill site and the dam. And we were joking, Matt and I were joking about it before, because one of the things Mrs. Gould would have seen with fair frequency, not that she would ever admit it publicly, was watching the Molella boys skinny dipping in that pond. That's, I want to take any of your thunder, so Matt, please, come up.
Most of you don't know who I am, and I don't think there's too many of you here that know Mr. Kading, and I see all kinds of family and friends here. My name is Matt Molella. I am Lou Molella's son. This is my cousin Joe here, and Millie. And my grandfather was Chick. My experience here is a little unique. Lots of kids grow up in Millbrook. Lots of kids have a funny background. My mother passed away when I was 10. She was a Bennett student, and it was a tragedy, and affected a whole bunch of people. But one of the good things that come out of every tragedy, believe it or not, I truly believe that, was that I got to come and live with my grandparents. And I'll share some things with you. So my sister, Robin, Dr. Robin Molella, she's on staff at the Mayo Clinic. One of her passions is genealogy. So if you'd like to visit the Molella Wood tree on Ancestry.com, she has done quite a bit of research on both sides of our family, going up through through my grandfather and my great-grandfather on my grandfather's side and on my grandmother's side. So you've got Molella and Gala. So it's hard for everybody to see here, but what I'll do is, my grandfather is here, and you've got, in the way Ancestry.com works is it's all interactive. You can open up different trees and move things from left to right. I'll talk through it, and then you guys, I can send this to anyone if you'd like. But my grandfather's Dominic Molella, right? He married Amelia, you guys know Chick and Millie, right? And then we have Salvatore. It's listed as Salvatore, but my understanding is his name was Salvan. So we have Salvano Molella, who came here very early. My understanding is he came here in the late 1800s. Some of the things that we've found, actually fairly recently, was that he naturalized by 1910, which is pretty early, in my understanding. I know David can probably fill that in, but another thing is that he chose to create his homestead and purchase property on the other end of Millbrook, away from the alley, which was not real common. Most of the community was knitted together in the alley. And I remember my grandmother saying how much she hated coming away from the alley and living out in the boondocks, away from everybody, and she'd complain about it all the time. When she was young, I guess, and until she made friends with the Walshes and later the Booths. I know Fran and Howard were really close friends of the Cadies as well. So one of the mysteries in genealogy that we had as a family for years, we always knew there was a connection with the Tarrant family and the Molella family. As a matter of fact, my grandfather, even when I was young, would go visit some of the Tarrant elder guys around. There was one in Clinton Corners that did small engine repair, but he always talked about his Uncle Joe. And Uncle Joe was actually here before my great-grandfather. And he worked on the railroad. Down near, there was a spur that went through by Stamford Road, I believe. And he worked on the railroad and lived in that area. And my father and my Uncle Sal, I was talking to them on the phone earlier today, they were reminiscing, as they knew I was going to be here with you folks tonight, and they were reminiscing about Uncle Joe's mustache. So Uncle Joe had a huge Italian handlebar mustache, and he smoked the little Italian crooked stick cigars all the time with the Nolans, and it had a terrible smell. And when they'd go visit Uncle Joe, they would have to give him hugs and kisses. And to this day, my Uncle Sal, big tough guy, talks about how that thing stunk and he hated it. So that's Uncle Joe Tarrant, and this is my great-grandfather Salvan, and his father was Dominic Molella in Italy, never came to the States, and Filomena Cardinal. So there's a Cardinal connection between. Now Filomena, my great-great-grandfather, Dominic, died very young, and Joseph Tarrant married my great-great-grandmother and had another family, and that was Uncle Joe, and his kids and the Tarrant family. As far as I know all the detail there. By the way, by no means am I an expert, and I'm only sharing things as I know them through oral history. All right, so I've got my cousin Paula here. So this is the still existing genealogy mystery in the family. Orazio Luigi Savacchio came to Millbrook at some point in time, and he was a blacksmith, or actually an iron worker. He had very little, from what we know in the family, at least what I know, and Paul probably has more information, but he was not particularly versed in horses. He was an iron worker. He was a fine metal craftsman. And Paul was telling me earlier about some of the things that he saw around the house when he and Louis were cleaning up the place. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, ornate, leaf work with the veins of the leaves. And by the way, I think the Historical Society has a paper written by Louis, Paul's brother. In that are two really nice interviews, one with my grandfather and one with Mr. Seppy. Both of those interviews are gold. I mean, the paper, no offense to Louis, but paper was a college paper. But those two interviews, they're really special. I have a copy here if you have lost that in your archives, or if you'd like another copy, I'll give it to you before I leave. One of the things that Mr. Bird, the original blacksmith, I guess showed some of the town fathers with an amulet that was particularly intricate and beautiful. And they asked where he got it, and he said Louis made it. So that would have been my great-grandfather, the blacksmith. The blacksmith shop that you know in the village, there were some small parcels of land that were still kicking around in my family up till a few years ago. The mystery. The mystery is, somewhere along the line, we changed our name from Savacchio to Galli. There's a number of different versions of that story. My cousin Maria, who is a Galli descendant from one of the sisters, and I'll show you a family picture later, but she's been popping emails all over the place, and her brothers and our family have been talking about this. So my understanding, and it does correlate with some Paul Cherubino's version of it, is that one of the names was taken from the family that he lived in. He was an illegitimate child, and he was trained and given a profession, a skill in Italy, taken in by another family, and he took their name. And whether that was Galli or Savacchio, I'm not sure. I believe it was Savacchio. When he immigrated to the United States, he immigrated as Savacchio. I'll show you my grandmother's wedding invitation, where she used the name Savacchio. And then there's all kinds of interesting history around a murder in Albany and all kinds of interesting things. But the way the story goes is his natural father was actually a doctor who later in life realized he had no heirs and wanted his true son, to take his name and continue the Galli name. I don't know if that's true. That's one story. It's a story that Paul heard from, Paul Cherubino heard from his brother as well. Not sure. But that's still a mystery. We're not exactly sure where all this goes. But we do know what happened when they got here. They created one hell of a family and produced a lot of cool things over the years. So, all right, I'm going to show you some pictures. This is the Molella family. This is my great-grandfather. All right, Salvan. That's Uncle Chick, or that's Chick, my grandfather. His sister, Brigitte. What I wanted to get to you from this picture, and this was his brother William, who passed away, his brother Joe, my Aunt Fanny. A lot of these folks scattered after the First World War, right, as the estates and the work here kind of calmed down. People left. They went to New Jersey, they went to Danbury, they went all over the world, all over the states to try to find work. And then they branched out, their families grew. So she went to Danbury, married a gentleman, boy help me, the Danbury family, Joey. And then Nazaro, the Nazaro family. She married a gentleman by the name of Nazaro. They moved to Danbury. She had a number of sons, and they were faithful to my grandfather for many years. She died very young, and my grandfather took care of them for some time. He raised another family. One of the things that I really wanted to get across to everyone was my grandfather and his father never went back to Italy. And there was a reason for that. They didn't have a romantic attachment to the old country. Their vision of the old country was a patrician society where you either were a lord or a serf. And they thoroughly believed in America and making a way here. And they talk about that in that interview that your brother did with my dad. And they were all in from day one when they got here. And my grandfather told me the same thing. And to this day, I don't remember. I know my grandfather, I heard him speak fluent Italian. He could speak it. So could my grandmother, obviously. I know my Uncle Sal can, and my dad can now, or at least he wants to think he can. but they never did. Not when I, not around the house. And it was all about assimilation, becoming part of this world and this country, and making a future for themselves.
Who's the lady in the background?
That's my great grandma. That's Brigitte Conti, I believe. Sure, doesn't she? But even more, doesn't. That's my, that's my grandfather's sister. Also Brigitte, I believe. She married the Nazero and went to. He was supposed to be a tough hombre. Supposedly, he showed up with weapons. So anyway, as a matter of fact, my grandfather had to go on as a had to be on present at all their dates. This is this is Orazio Luigi Savacchio Galli and his wife, and I'm assuming the two oldest girls in the family, right? So the girls were oldest. Were the oldest, so it's either Rosie or
It would be
Rosie and
DeSantis.
Rosie. Well, yeah, Rosemary, Aunt Rosie DeSantis, right? And then Cherubino, right? It would be Aunt Madeline Cherubino. All right, so this is a cool wedding picture. So some folks that you all might know. This gentleman was my grandfather's best man. He kind of got out of the picture pretty quick, but the hombres, the cool hombres here that's Uncle Louie over here. That's my grandfather, my grandmother. That's Irene. That's your mom, right? That's my Uncle Jerry Galli. And then my Uncle Al is there as well, right there. And then that's Michael Manzi, I believe, right? And then we got Betty Wilson, so Betty Cherubino, and Rosemary DeSantis down here. How's that, right? Very cool. So this is the wedding invitation for that wedding. And everybody was going down one path, and I said, wait a minute, guys, you might want to take a look at this. So this is, and you can see the Americanization starting to come in. This is where it says Mr. and Mrs. Louis Savacchio. And my dad's name is Louis Orazio Molella. So he's named after, Louis, my grandmother's father, who was Orazio Louis. He swapped the names. So, but they started calling him, Louis Savacchio, and then, of course, it was Salvan, Molella, and they called him Salvatore here. But he wasn't Salvatore, that was an Americanization. Right. So it's Amelia Beatrice and Dominic, 1935, August 18th, 1935. Pretty cool, huh? Some of these are just some of my favorite pictures out of the family collection, right? So that's my grandfather, a very neat 30s car. And that's my dad, Lou, and Sal, right? Great picture of the Molella family is, some of you folks might have known them back in the day, right? So you got my Uncle Chick, my favorite aunt of all time, Aunt B, and my Uncle Sal, and my dad, kind of chubby at that point, Pop, and my mom and my grandpa, he was a linebacker, man. Go ahead. My grandma. Yeah, that's me. No, my mom's not. This is how I remember the guy. This is where a lot of the vision came from. This is where, Mr. Greenwood and David mentioned it, the family had a vision. This man was fearless. He was, as you know, first generation, spoke perfect English without an accent, but could speak fluent Italian. He was a man's man in every way sense of the word. He could fix anything. And he could, didn't always look pretty, but he could fix it. He was a steam fitter, he was a tin knocker, he worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, he was a dental technician during the First World War. Mr. Diedrich, my great-grandfather Salvan, I think he was like 14 when he joined, or maybe a little bit older than that, but not much. And he got wrapped up in the military. They trained him as a dental technician, but then the war started spinning up, and Salvan went to Mr. Diedrich, and Mr. Diedrich pulled strings and got him yanked and brought him back to Millbrook. At some point in time, he went out west, and as a young kid moving in with him, we spent a ton of time together. It was really quite something. Really, probably one of the coolest things that I can remember in my life. And he told me they had gone out west, and he had jumped on a freight train with a bunch of hobos and went out to Colorado. And I'm thinking, wow, my grandfather was a cowboy, And so I pushed him a little bit on it, and he said, Matt, they gave me a rake that was long as a car and had big, long tongs on the end of it. And I pitched hay into wagons, and the wagons were endless, and the hay was endless, and my hands ripped open like blood. He said, I didn't stay there very long. So he came back east, and I know that there was a family confectionery in the village at some point. I know he was involved a little bit in that, or getting us out of that. I'm not sure all of the detail around it, but I do remember hearing about it. He is clearly my hero. Now, I think he had a 7th grade education. We built, when we took his beloved greenhouse down, we built just a hotbed, framed with some glass over top of it. And I remember they were trying to square it up. And you got my Uncle Chick and my dad, they're all super college kids. And he rips off Pythagorean triplets out of his memory like it's nothing, and they squared that thing up just like that. Bright man, fearless. So at some point in time, early in the 60s, it was his vision to buy the mill from the Walshes. And he got together with his sons, and they, between everyone, they scraped up the resources necessary to acquire the building. And then the rest is really history. It's not my intent to talk about that building, but afterwards, if anyone wants to ask me or my cousin Joe about the building from a history perspective, we'll gladly share whatever we know. It's currently owned in a family business between the brothers. Go ahead. We'll go through a few of these pictures. That's my grandmother, and this is the side of Sal's, you guys know it as Sal's apartment, which was an old barn, and they turned it into an apartment during the 50s. I know my dad and my Uncle Sal came back from the military on leave to frame and build, help my grandfather build that part, put the roof on. My grandmother hated it here. One of the things, the reason I included this, is one of the things that I remember my grandfather teaching me, and I still know how to do it, and he got it from his father. My great-grandfather came here to work for Charles Diedrich. And he came here as we call him a gardener, but he was more than a gardener. I mean, he wasn't a mow and blow guy, all right? He knew how to graft trees. He knew how to grow plants that weren't indigenous to the area. There's some pictures here. I'll point out some precious plants that were absolutely, priceless to my grandfather. But you see through Millbrook, not so much anymore because the deer love them, but as you go through Millbrook, you'll see, and I know, Skip, your parents had a bunch of them, all of these yews, they were like a green shrub that, made beautiful hedges. And the deer just love them, so with the deer population we have now, they don't survive, they get chewed to hell. But those were all started from cuttings and proliferated in sand flats with root tone hormone and grown up from little tiny twigs. And then every year, and I still remember my Uncle Sal saying, that son of a bitch is going to make me move them again this year. So, by hand, they would have to move those trees every year and root cut them so that they would create a ball, and they would move them from bed to bed. And I've got a couple pictures of the famous garden up on the hill there. By the way, I'll tell you something my grandfather told me was really funny. The skit you'll enjoy. Go ahead. So that's my grandfather's garden. Folks, that's 300 tomato plants. All right. I remember playing flag football one year when, I'm not sure who he got it from, but he got, I think it was, well, he got it might have come up from Quattro's, from Mr. Quattro, who was a good friend of my grandfather's. And it was all chicken manure. And it stunk the entire village up. We were playing flag football down in the Y field. And everybody was going, what the hell is that smell? And my head was down. But anyway, that was truly 300 tomato plants we planted that year. And that was typical. I mean, you could go up and grab a tomato, a cucumber, and I defy anyone that came to visit my grandfather during the summer or fall didn't go home with bags of vegetables, right? All right, so this is kind of a cool picture. That's the mill. That's my dad and Sal. My grandfather real young. My grandmother real young and beautiful looking. Right here you see what they, and I know it as a catalpa tree. It's kind of an interesting tree. The trunk only gets about this high, and it gets all these sprouts out every year. It's a pain in the neck because you got to cut them all back to the stump every year. And my Uncle Chick used to yell all the time about having to clean up those trees every year. My grandfather wouldn't let him get rid of them because his father planted them, and they were very special. Back to that story. If you go back one, this garden, every time it rained, your dad's topsoil will come down and fertilize me. Grandfather said, it's all right. Rod will put more up there. That's a beautiful shot of my grandmother. Really. She got to come to my wedding. And it's funny, here's a cool story about my grandmother. Catholic Italian, you know. She actually did have a little bit of an accent. And when it came time to marry my wife, who was not Catholic, not Italian, my parents gave me a little bit of friction, and they weren't sure they were gonna. We got married in Ohio, in Cleveland, Ohio, in a Presbyterian church by what I affectionately call a priestette. And of course, at that time, everybody was, especially my mom Jerry, was pretty spun up over it. My grandmother said, "Oh, stop this baloney. The kid's getting married, I'm going." And she did. She flew to Cleveland on a plane, the first time in her entire life. She got on a plane and flew to Cleveland, and she sat in the front row and watched her grandson get married. Kind of cool. That's a really cool shot of my grandfather. That's before this was an apartment. That's before Sal's house was an apartment, before the steps were there, before the greenhouse was there. And that's, you know, I don't know, for those of you who didn't know my grandpa personally, I always thought his arms looked like Popeye the Sailor. He was not anybody you wanted to mess with, that's for sure. But I remember one time there was a plug, I was probably about 15, 16, and there was a plugged pipe in the basement of the Homestead house, which is on, and he said, "Come on, Matt, we'll go fix this thing." So we had to break a galvanized joint that probably been in place for 50 years. And you got to have two big pipe wrenches. I don't know if you've ever picked up any of those things. I know Skip has. And, you know, here I am, young kid, I'm playing football, I'm tough, and I pick this thing up and I go to put it on that joint, to break that joint, and he said, "Oh, what's the matter?" And I couldn't get it. I was struggling just to get the damn thing adjusted right. He grabbed one in each hand, spun the knobs, got it on there, and popped that thing like it was nothing. It was, yeah, he made an impression. All right, so Paulie helped this. I don't know why nobody's smiling. And this set of pictures was my great-grandmother's birthday, great-grandmother Galai's birthday, right? And, you know, that's my Uncle Louie, Paulie's dad, my Uncle Al. I think Uncle Jerry was taking the picture because he was there that day. There's a whole sequence, and I believe that's Aunt Madeline, right? Yeah, that's Madeline, right? my Aunt Rosie, and then my grandmother, Millie. Okay. So one of the cool things you'll see here is, it's my understanding, during the Second World War, she had 4 stars hanging in her window. All right, so all 3 of her sons and a grandson were all there in theater. And as far as I know, they all saw significant action. And this is just a fantastic picture. I can't name everyone. Sandra probably can help, Paulie can help, but I know you've got Rosemary, I know you've got Betty's there, Betty Wilson and Betty Cherubino tonight. I think that's Sue Meeks. You got great grandmother Aunt Rosie. B, that's Aunt B right there, that's Beatrice. You know, just a beautiful picture. Now this is a cool shot. It's one of my favorite shots I have. I didn't have access. I'm sorry for the poor quality. Of course, that's my Uncle Jerry. Now, notice how tall he was. Uncle Jerry was not a short man. He was a tall guy. He was real good looking. A great way about himself. He was very confident. My understanding, and my pop has his entire service record, he drove a tank, entered the war late. His tank was named the Millbrook. And he told my dad that he rode over the gates of Dachau. So a tank called the Millbrook was in the European theater in the late part of the year and helped liberate the Dachau concentration camp. And he had a devastating photo album that I believe his ended up with his wife after he passed away. Obviously, my Uncle Louis and my Uncle Al. Great picture. I believe this is on at the alley, and this is down in the alley at one of the houses, maybe at the Santa's house.
Looks like your grandmother's.
That's the gala.
That's the Gala house. Okay. All right. So.
In Alton Place, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, this is, in our family, this is kind of a famous picture of all of the kids, you know, playing and hanging out. So, I can pick, you know, Paul Cherubino is there, Betty, my dad, my Uncle Sal, B, and Uncle Chick. You know, they're all just, everybody's having a great time hanging out on the stairs because there's no room at the table. And that is probably my favorite picture of my Uncle Sal and my dad. So they I think got quite a scolding and were told, you will sit for this picture. And this is, these are the barn doors, and that window I believe is still in the downstairs of that building. Right. All right, I'm going to treat you guys, this is a very short 30-second video. It's home movies from 1970. Joey, I don't know, you'll see in this little segment, you will see a classic Molella. My brother who is here, Christopher, my youngest brother, and my grandfather who is here. And that's Joseph right there. Okay. They first of all the kids loved my grandfather. They just adored him. You couldn't go by him without getting grabbed and given a beard rub, and being made to go get a cold beer. But the kids just loved him. He loved the kids. My brother and my grandfather shared the same birthday. They were born on the exact same day, May 31st. So every May 31st we had a huge cookout. Extended family, some bigger than others. The real famous one was the year we had the Marine Corps here, and B legendarily did feed the Marine Corps. She fed an army on the spot. So go ahead, Warren. You'll see Uncle Al, Uncle Jerry, my Uncle Chip, my Aunt Gloria, my dad, my mom, a whole bunch of folks here. You have to click it and then unclick it. Yep. So that's Grandpa, my brother. Joey's busy eating. So when I sent this to my brother, he couldn't talk for a while. I wish I had this photo of my grandfather. So now we pan, and this is really why I shared it with you folks. It was a birthday party, and that's Danielle right there. My cousin's one of the twins, either his Uncle Chick, my grandma, right? My Uncle Sal, my Uncle my Uncle Jerry, and then my Uncle Al ends up right over here. There he is. Now, I don't know if you guys know my Uncle Al lived right at the corner of Franklin Avenue, right across from the old. Oh, that's Joey and Danielle running off into the sunset. We had some really, really wonderful family times on those. Now, is that it? That's it. All right. So, I know you know my Uncle Al had the house right in the corner. I think Richie Cross owns it, lives there now. And all of the grand nieces and nephews spent lots of time here. And I feel really privileged that I get to spend some real choice time there myself. I worked for Mr. Strauss when he owned them during high school. And one Sunday, my Uncle Al came over and he said, aren't you going to have pasta? I said, well, Uncle Al, I got to work. And he said, well, it's 12 o'clock. I'm going to put the water on in a little while. You come over and Mr. Strauss is over there looking, what are you doing here? And so we got into this habit for probably my sophomore and junior year when I was working at the Strausses on the Sundays. Uncle Al would cook me pasta and I would sit a little tin table with the Carol's napkins and he would cook me one hell of a nice pasta dish. And we had good times. He was a great guy. And Mr. Strauss would just shake his head. We didn't even argue with him. And I said, Mr. Strauss, you just docked me the time. That was it. Questions? David, you wanted to talk about the mill a little bit. Joe's here.
Where did Frank Molella belong in this family?
So my great-grandfather had a brother.
I knew Frank real well.
Okay, so Frank was my grandfather's cousin. My father's second cousin. Okay,
He worked at Thorndale, he was our greenhouse man.
Right.
He was real good to me when I was a small kid.
Yeah, he was very nice. He was very nice to me as well.
He walked from the alley down to Thorndale and back every day, carrying his lunchbox. I remember that.
I'll pass one on to you. My father woke me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, says, Johnny, you gotta go sleigh riding. The snow is beautiful. So I go up to the little hill and I get on my sleigh and I go down this hill. 100 miles an hour on this ice. I go jumping across the road and smashed right into the garage, wooden thing. I'm sure I was knocked out. And the next thing you know, I come to, and who is it but Frank Molella? Johnny, you okay? And, yeah, I'm okay. But that was my thing, and I've never forgot. It was Frank Molella that was walking to work. In those days, it was 7 in the morning to 5 at night.
Sure.
So Frank just happened to be.
Matt, just a comment. Your grandfather showed a tremendous amount of vision and ability to take a mill. And I've been in a lot of mills. I was not through that particular mill. But to take that and convert it, as he did, to apartments, living areas. Now, you could take a dairy barn and a warehouse, and it's simple to make apartments out of it. But the tremendous amount of insight that he had relative to that mill. And a little bit of a vignette. One day when I was walking home from the village, there was obviously a New York couple or something just wandering around. And as I passed by with my bag of groceries, the girl said to me, by the way, what factory was that? And I said, well, it was a mill. And she said, a mill? And so I said, well, come around the back, and I'll show you this guy. I said, it was water powered. She said, my God, that must have been some water wheel. No,
So here's what I know. Here's what I know about the construction of the mill, and Joe, I'll be kicking in here. So it was purchased, you know, as I described, and my grandfather really had the vision for it. My Uncle Chick at one point really wanted to be a restaurateur.
yes, yes, I remember.
The actual building itself, as David said, is 7 stories. At the very base, where the sluiceway exits, there's a, what we called, we were told it was a 100 horsepower turbine.
Turbine.
David, I never knew that there was any electricity made there. What I understood was when it was modernized, the turbine was put in from the modern dam, and it was a huge pipe. I don't know if the pipe is still there or
Yeah,
not, but
it is.
it runs through a tunnel in the rock cliff, and I've been up in that tunnel, all crawling all through it, and there's initials and folks with letters turned around and interesting names from, you know, different parts of the world. And anyway, that water comes down in, and there's a set of stairs that goes up through the first 4 or 5 floors, 3 or 4 floors. At the very bottom, each floor in the stone section, the rock gets a foot thicker. It's what, 6 feet thick, 6, 7 feet thick at the bottom. It'll still be here when we're all long gone. There's a part in the basement of the mill where you really can't go down there. It's not an area. I know Susan would love to have gotten everybody in there, but it's either living area where people live or infrastructure that you really can't safely go visit. So in that part, you can see the early part of the mill. It's my understanding, and maybe you probably cleared it up for us, but there's a portion of the mill that's pre-revolutionary, and then it was modernized somewhere around the turn of the century. And the modern part is the part that you see. And you can see where the early masonry starts. It's a flat stone layout as opposed to the field stone layout that you see everywhere else. Huge beams, just amazing joinery and incredible machinery. There's a shaft that ran all the way from the bottom to the top of the building, and a system of chutes and sluices to move grain around. There's still rings on my cousin Elizabeth's front door, you know, right next to it where they lash horses. And there's the first set of apartments that I'm aware of were out on the north wing, you know, and that there's actually a couple of, we call bowling alley apartments. There's 4 of them there on 2 floors. They were actually slanted floored grain bins. That milled grain would go, or stored grain would go, and would stay in those bins, and you could pull a sluice or a gate and release, you know, that, put a canvas bag under it, and then deliver it to a farm. Farmers would pull up with their grain and load it. There was a railroad track right in the middle of Izzy's living room there that went all the way to the back of the building. There's shafts and wheels and all kinds of neat stuff. As a kid, it was an amazing place to have access to.
Matt, the original, as it came out of a turbine, generally speaking, it would be one big shaft run off by
correct.
leather belts.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And they would start with the top where they did the corn shelling, for example, and then come down and process it as it went down. But it's very interesting, those pen stocks are still there, right? The pipes, the pen stocks.
Some are there,
Yeah,
but most of the building has been gutted at this point.
Oh,
There's
okay.
only very limited artifacts left from the
Okay.
actual mill. You know, there's not you know, when my family took ownership of the mill, it was in very bad shape. There was no heat. It was infested with cats and rodents. There had been a fire. There was rot in a lot of the flooring. I remember as a little kid knowing, you know, being told where you can step, where you can't step. And we're talking 1962. I had access to that building through my entire childhood. The south side of the building, as you see it when you come into it, Skip and a lot of the folks will know that that part of the building wasn't there. It was a ramp into a set of sliding doors and into the lower works of the building, and they wanted to develop the upper floors and put the restaurant in, and they needed an entryway. And my grandfather, with the help of maybe, you know, some local folks, designed that on the fly. And my dad, I was the honorary gopher. I remember riding my bicycle to Ribbon Breaks to buy nails and come back and go, Matt, go get this, Matt, go get that. I was, you know, about 10, 12 years old when they built that. That part of the building is not original. It's really the only piece. The only part of the building that has not been touched at all is the penthouse of the building, which is where all the belts and gates and everything. And you can see that when you come down from Anson Avenue, you know, by some of the buildings, you see that little box on top. I've pretty much been through that whole place. Spent a lot of time down there fishing and swimming, and you know, Miss School probably got an eye full of stuff she didn't want to get an eye full of.
And mention the other thing about the stonework and the concrete, and why that dam is still functioning today.
Right,
It's
so
because of your family.
the dam was in, and all the stonework was in really bad repair. I remember being able to run my hand over, and it was like breaking apart sand, and the stones had all fallen down off of a lot of those stone walls, especially up in and around the what we call the gate, the control house, or the pier. We call it the pier. It's really a 2 or 3 story outcropping on the side of the dam, and then there's a set of walls, retaining walls that run all around. They're just amazing. They drop down 140, 50 feet along the side of the dam, and then there was what we call the turtleback on the other side, on your side, David, which is, you know, kind of a rounded area, and there's a really good spot to put a bar of soap in there if you know. So that was just an awesome swimming hole as a kid, but there was a couple of years where we took the water down, and the first time that my grandfather took the water down, I know a lot of folks get really angry when we drop the water in that lake, in that pond, because it smells, and you know, there's a lot of mud and debris and dry stuff, and we have to keep it that way for a while. But if we don't do that, then we won't be able to maintain the dam. We won't be able to keep the valves from, you know, so that they can be open and closed. We won't be able to, you know, maintain it, basically, and keep it the clean and beautiful thing that we all enjoy. So at one point in time, all of those walls were, you know, were falling apart. And my grandfather was blessed with 3 real strong boys, with lots of talent and loyalty. And he came up, first of all, one of the things that was wrong with the dam was the water was going underneath the bluestone top. And it was, in the wintertime, it would buckle and move the bluestone, which is really bad. It's the first way to find a dam, you know, have it destroyed by the weather and the ages. So my grandfather came up with a unique fix. You know, there was no way we could, you know, lift that bluestone and reset it. And even if we did, there's no way we could do as good a job as the people who did it the first time. So he came up with this idea to put a concrete band-aid, basically a bandage across the back side of the back face of the dam. We lowered all the water. It took a long time. He used Coca-Cola, and every day we'd put a big wrench on the rod, and we'd move it a little bit one way, move it a little another. And they emptied the dam. They formed up this space, and they built scaffolding, and they poured a concrete patch. You can feel it if you're ever down there when you're swimming in that lake. You can run your hand and you go to climb up on the dam. You can feel it. It's about that big, and it comes out about 6 inches, and it keeps the water from going underneath. It seals that gap between the bluestone and the masonry. And then they pointed up all of that stonework, and they became masons. They may not be skilled, but they became masons.
They did a good job. Chick used to take me over and show me what was going on.
So they all, you know, they mixed mud. I learned how to mix mortar. You know, I still remember little clank, clank, clank mixer that we had, and that was it every weekend, man. It was, you know, they worked every weekend for a good couple of years, and they did all of the stonework on all of those faces, the walls, the dam itself, the face of the dam, the back face of the dam, and restored all of that stonework. And that was my grandfather, Chick, my dad, and Sal. And it was a lot of work, and with, I'm sure, a lot of help from friends and family through the community. But that dam, to this day, in the middle of the summer, when everything is in drought and there is nothing but a trickle of water across it, the water runs level all the way across that blue stone. Not a single drip in one place or a lean over, it is absolutely perfectly level. And that was before lasers. I don't know how they did it, but they sure did it well. That's really what I know about the mill right now. It's completely developed. There's very little space that's not developed. You know, we've got tenants, you know, in the building, and it's viable. It's in constant maintenance, and it has state-of-the-art boilers put in by, you know, 3 generations of steam fitter and plumber. It's well maintained and well managed, and hopefully it'll be there long after we're all gone.
I remember going there with my grandfather. That was during the Second World War. That was the only place you get a tube vulcanized.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Those tractor tubes and stuff.
George Welch,
George Welch,
He
right?
did the recapping tires, remember, at World War
Oh,
II,
wow.
you could only get a recap tire. When your tires went bald in your car, you took it up to George Welch up there, and he'd recap it for you.
And I've got the stationery, it says vulcanizer.
Really?
That was it, yeah.
Wow.
That's what
So-
they did.
I remember the day that Irene's husband showed up with a steam Jenny, and it cleaned that entire floor where Lizzie's apartment is right now. And it was painted, I mean, there was layers of sign paint everywhere, because Mr. Walsh, when he would clean a brush, just down any surface. And literally, it was everywhere. So all that beautiful woodwork
Yeah.
that you see, you know, was cleaned. I remember you being there. I remember your husband. I remember all of that. You know, so
John Welch was the painter.
Jack
George and John.
George, right?
Yeah. John was the painter. He could letter. He used to letter all the trucks and stuff like that. It was
Pretty good.
Yeah.
He left all his paint everywhere in the building. There's still spots I think upstairs where you can see.
Well, he took a nip now and then too.
I know my dad said there must have been 100 cats in that building. Anything else that I can share that folks would enjoy?
Just a comment about Paul's branch of the family. But they were iron workers, par excellence, there was no question about it. And in addition to making that beautiful work that you're describing there, they kept this agricultural department, agricultural culture going. Plowshares need to be repaired, discs need to be repaired, harrows need to be repaired, and hinges for barns. As a matter of fact, I have one of the hinges that your grandfather probably made at home. Handcrafted, and you could tell they were handcrafted. Beautiful, beautiful work. They kept this place together. No question about it.
My grandfather did wagon work, built wagons back in
Exactly.
the day, wheelwright work,
Exactly.
and would never leave the shop. And it wasn't until after my father came back from the service, they had a little bounce to get in between, because my father saw the future and he wanted to get a truck and go out and do some horses. And my grandfather would never put up with it. So he still always stayed in the shop and did that kind of work. They brought the wagons into anything like that.
And one other aspect of that, Skip Safari's crew, his grandfather's crew, used to have wood, stone masons, okay? and they had 2 sets of star drills and chisels. One set used to be at the blacksmith's to be sharpened, and the other set would be used, so they would alternate the sets. So these guys were busy not only shoeing horses and fixing wagons and so making hinges, but they were also sharpening very important tools.
So
That's
my-
true,
one of
that's
my-
true, Frank. I was
Pardon me?
told that by, they used to bring them back and forth, sharpen them.
Oh, yeah, well, I didn't realize you were there, okay.
One of my first memories, I mean, literally first memories of being alive and breathing was riding Uncle Al's tractor, which I think he kept in the blacksmith shop at some period in time, up Front Street. My dad put me on his knee and drove, the old farm hall up Front Street from the blacksmith shop. And I remember I at some point, they didn't give me, I remember it, it was really in rough shape at that time, but it still had horseshoes all over the walls and
Yeah.
iron and that kind of stuff. And then I remember Uncle Al restoring that building. And there was a lot of brouhaha because he started it without a permit, paperwork and all that stuff, But I do remember that I think there's a copper roof on that building in the front. And I remember there had been some headbutts between my Uncle Al and my grandfather, and that was part of the mending at that time was when he was putting that building back together. My grandfather had been a tin knocker at one point in his life, and he did that standing seam copper roof that's on that building in front of it. Pretty cool. But, neat stuff. So, thank you very much.